that always comes up when we talk about spiritual work or energy work or anything to do with the etheric part of life is this thing about the true self, about expanding into your true form, about connecting with your higher self or becoming who you are. All of those things are really just trying to explain the same thing. To understand this expansion into the true self, we need to understand what is the true self. But most importantly, we need to understand the different elements that make up who we are. And to understand this, we need to understand ourselves as a Russian doll. Because for most of us, the easiest element or aspect to understand is the physical one. We're going to say that a part of ourselves is the physical body, this body that you can touch. Inside that body lives your mind, that is not in your brain, but everywhere around you. And then we have the emotional layer, which is the emanation of emotions or electricity that come off your body whenever you're experiencing something. And then the doll at the deepest level is the soul or the essence or the spirit. In this case, we're going to use all of those words interchangeably, but I will argue that they are not. The soul, the spirit, the essence, even consciousness, they are slightly different terms and they explain slightly different things of the same thing. But just to avoid confusion, and for this video, we are going to assume that all of those things are the same thing. Now, I'm just explaining it in this way because for the human, it's easier to understand the body as a container. However, the more accurate way of explaining this container is to say that the spirit is the bigger doll, inside of which we have the physical body, the mental body, the emotional body, and a smaller or more condensed version of the biggest spirit that contains all of these bodies I just mentioned. When I say we need to expand into our true self, connect with our higher self, when we need to become aware of who we truly are, I am talking about the dimension of us that goes beyond the limitations of the physical body we inhabit to be able to truly become that higher self or that expanded self. We need to develop awareness. We need to become aware of the different layers, the different dimensions, the different selves, the different personalities that live inside the physical body. We even need to become aware of the different depths of the physical body. And the only way you recognize, or the only way you can get to perceive, to touch, to become that true self is through stillness. When you disconnect from all of the different layers that make up who you are and attune to the deeper, bigger, brighter, most powerful layer of who you are, is when you truly can recognize that true self. The true self is like a kernel of light. It's like a particle, a very big particle. But in the end, it's like a very specific part of you that when you finally touch it, when you finally plug into it, when you finally remember, life changes. Because then the personality, the name that you have, the identity that you have created for yourself as a person grows as well. It can be further developed. It can be more easily grounded into this earth. You can more easily express yourself as that personality through the mind controlled by spirit and not anymore by external influences or by the mind itself. All of the different aspects, dimensions, and dolls that make up who we are as a human are not fighting, or probably the other way around. The spirit, the soul, the essence, the consciousness is not against any of those dimensions. That essence of who we are is embedded in every of those dimensions, is in harmony and wants to be in harmony with your mind, with your name, with your personality, with your body. Because it knows itself as part of the whole. It knows that it is as spiritual in its core essence as your body is. Because the perception or the dimension of the spirit encompasses all of the other dimensions. It encompasses all. That's why it doesn't reject anything. It's like looking at yourself, at the world, from up to down, from the bigger perspective to the smaller perspective, from the most expansive dimension to the smaller dimension. And because that the spirit and that essence can see all of those dimensions, is that it doesn't reject any of it. When we look from the lower dimension of or perspective up, is when the problem arises, because from that perspective or dimension, we cannot see ourselves as the whole. We cannot see ourselves as complete or as part of something else, and that's why we struggle to accept the spirit or to understand the spirit. That's why the recommendation is always go to the highest vibration, go to the highest plane, and from there come down into the body, come down into yourself as that higher self, as that big dimension. Because only then will you stop feeling separate. And it's easier as well to become intuitive and behave intuitively when you have had that encounter with that bigger part of you. When we become intuitive, when we go into the world knowing how the world works, learning to feel energy, when we can recognize very accurately what a person is thinking or feeling, when we can recognize the road we need to take, whether we need to turn right or left, when we know to wait for certain things to accommodate in the world, in ourselves, or around ourselves, when we have this knowing of all of those things and this awareness of all of that, it means we are becoming more than our minds and our personalities. It doesn't mean that the mind or the personality we are invested in right now, it's wrong. But just as with the example of the Russian doll containing all of these elements and dimensions of who we are, when we trap ourselves into one of those containers, what we are doing is restricting ourselves to the perspective of that container. In this case, many of us, we restrict ourselves to the perspective of the mind. And as I said, the human mind is not only in the brain, but let's say that's the powerhouse of the mind. The mind is everywhere, in the body and around the body. But when we start to see life and understand ourselves through the perception and the filter of the mind, then we become smaller than what we truly are. Because what we truly are is a spiritual being inside of this container that is the body, and inside of this container that is the mind. When we awaken to the intuitive nature of the body and the intuitive nature of ourselves, we also become aware and we awaken to the true nature of the essence that lives inside the body, that moves through the body, that expresses itself through this body. We become aware of all of the different aspects that we have and that make up the puzzle of the Russian doll we are. When we become intuitive, or when we want to live an intuitive life and move into the world as this intuitive being, what we need to do is move our perspective from looking at life through the mind doll into the spiritual body. Because as I said, even though it is easier for us to understand the physical body as the container of everything else, in truth is that it's the spiritual body, the one that contains the physical body. As far as I know, there are 6 intuition types that helps us connect to this electromagnetic field that exists in the planet, in ourselves, and all around us. And 5 of those intuitive types are linked to our physical senses. So if you are not connected to your physical senses, it will be harder to be connected to that 6th sense. We might use intuition as an adjective and say, oh, you become intuitive. But intuition is not just an adjective, it's a way of being, it's a way of moving, it's a way of representing and acting and behaving in the world. It's a way of being truly. When you become your intuition, when you become the intuitive being that you are, you don't necessarily need to be activating this intuitive ability all the time. You just know things. You just are. You are constantly becoming aware of the energetic impulses all around you. And that's the reason why sometimes we need to shrink back into our human self, into our bodies. Because the perception of all of those electromagnetic impulses around us, that are the emotions of other people, their thoughts, their behaviors, the electromagnetic field of the city we live in, and the planet itself, because all of that needs to be filtered through the human body, it can be overwhelming to be activated intuitively all of the time. That's why when you work with intuition, when you are aware of that intuitive nature, sometimes you prefer to switch it off and just be fully present into your body and become your human self again, focusing in human things like, the color of your nails or the clothes you're wearing, or watching a movie, reading a book, going for a walk, trying to disconnect from the electromagnetic field all around you, because it can be overwhelming.